No one has control over a macro event. '08 was kind of a macro event. We saw that coming. In '06, '07, we went to Florida and checked out home builders and trying to get them here. And we would go to these MPCs, Chris. And I was standing at, this You Are Here table, like everything. And there's like 1,000 lots or 1,500, these big giant master plan communities. And I'm talking to a couple standing there. And I said, well, you guys going to buy a house, and all that? Oh, yeah. Well, what are you looking at? Well, this is our fifth house. Fifth house? Why are you buying houses? 5 houses. We're investors and we flip them. And you don't live in them? No. And so I asked the salesman, what percentage of the sales are investors? And they said, oh, almost all of them. I said, this is not going to last.
Yeah.
Right? Because there's no stability in that for that exact reason. So we came back and we had investors in a couple of deals. We said, we're selling all this. Don and I didn't have investors in our MPCs at the time. We sold them all in '06, '07, and then everything fell apart. But their investors wouldn't sell. So we had to deal with those properties and problems. So we learned not to take personal guarantees on debt. That's how we survived '08. That's how we survived many recessions.
Phillip, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you, Chris. It's quite an honor to be here, let me tell you.
I'm excited to have you here. It's been an honor already getting to know you. I was going to start, as I told you, with how you got into land development, but we got a few things to pick apart first.
Okay, sure.
The first is, how did you get into land development? But before that, why did you get kicked out of military school when you were 15?
Oh, that's a good question. Still a sensitive subject, as I was telling you. 50 years later, you wouldn't necessarily think you'd still be a little bit shy about that situation. But yes, I think it really boiled down to I have a problem with authority.
Okay.
I really like to make my own decisions. And when other individuals who were my age or even just slightly older telling me what to do, and it's not because I respected them, it's just because they had in some way gotten that authority, usually by brown nosing the higher ups. And when they would tell me to get down for push-ups or push you around and stuff, I would be rebellious about it. And didn't belong in military school. I liked the discipline and learned a lot. And what I learned from that experience was there always is going to be authority and you have to respect it. It doesn't mean that you want to live with it or deal with it, but I learned that I really wanted to make my own decisions.
Yeah. Why did you go in the first place? Did parents want you to go?
Somewhat. That's a good question. It was because I've always been fairly independent.
Yeah.
Even as a child or teenager, I wanted to make my own decisions, and parents were telling me what to do and all. And so that was an opportunity to go off to school in a boarding school. It was up in Indiana to get way away from home and live my own life. And when I was 14 and 15, I failed and came home, and they called us. They called my parents on Christmas Eve and said, "Your son cannot set foot back on this campus." So it was not a great Christmas. That was a long time ago.
Okay, so you got done at 15. Didn't you hold the job at Getty Oil or Getty before getting into the business?
Yeah, absolutely. I think I want to mention, though, before that, my brother Don and I have a twin brother. Yeah. And a lot of people don't know that. And the reason that's important to mention is because, and I'd like to say this, it's not unique, we get around twice as often.
Okay.
So when you look just like someone else, someone says, "Oh, yeah, we met so-and-so." I said, "No, I don't think I've ever met you." And it's a little bit embarrassing. And so we've had a little bit of a problem for the last 65 years with names and keeping up. But we deal with it. And he's my partner in everything. And I'm his partner in almost every deal that we've done over the last, 50 years. Well, he's kind of the idea guy and I'm the implementer.
Okay.
And so we were in high school. It was 1976. And what happened in 1976? Well, it was the bicentennial.
Okay.
And so we said, okay. He said, well, we're going to go sell fireworks. There's going to be a lot of people buying fireworks for the bicentennial. And we're 17. And so we found a location, and that takes a lot of work. Research all the rules, regulations, get a state license and the city ordinances that try to prohibit it. So we did that for about 5 years, and we would grow the business. We had multiple locations, did it all through college. Well, not all through, until about midway through college, and would hire people. And that's where we kind of learned land, because we learned about city ordinances and government control over certain things and barriers to entry, which was important in the fireworks location. Who had the closest location to the biggest city usually got the most business.
And you did that for how long?
5 years.
Really?
So junior year, senior year in high school, and then freshman, sophomore, and junior year in college.
And y'all have stayed working together your whole career?
We did, and we used that earnings that we earned, and it was pretty profitable. It was fairly profitable.
Yeah.
To buy a rent house in Austin, and so that was our first real estate endeavor.
Yeah.
And rented that to students and sold that a few years later.
The student housing down in Austin, you probably should have held that one for a while. What did you buy it for? Probably, I can't imagine what you paid for that house.
It was a little postage stamp house. If you leaned very hard against the wall, it would collapse. So we spent a lot of time in repairing the house personally.
All right. So you get back up and it's the 80s. And before we get into Huff, go ahead.
Yeah. You asked about Getty Oil.
Yeah.
Well, when we were in college, Don and I sat down for several times and we'd get a magazine. It was Texas Monthly, I believe, at the time. And it would list the wealthiest Texans.
Yeah.
And when we would review that, it was pretty obvious that they were in real estate and oil and gas. That was the two industries in Texas at the time. So I said, oh, look, I'll go into oil and gas and you go into real estate. And that's what we did.
Okay. So how did you pick land development and getting into building master plan communities?
Okay. That's a great question. My brother was always in real estate and land brokering and handling it. And I was fortunate that my father was, successful in business. So I had that as a role model, my brother and I. And growing up, we grew up in Greenville, Texas. Most people don't know that. That's where I went to elementary school, junior high. And he was a cowman and he liked cows. And so he had a piece of property up in Carrollton.
Okay.
It was all floodplain where he would raise his cows and had it for 50 years. And so I came back from Houston and said, Dad, let's look at somehow maybe entitling this property. When we say entitle, that means zoning and getting things ready to go for development that was encroaching, or not encroaching, but coming. And so I kind of worked on that, and it was 900 acres in the floodplain, a big time problem. And so that took a lot of work. And it was the last levee project that the Corps of Engineers ever approved in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. So we built 5 miles of levee and sold bonds and did all this stuff that really is learning experience for all master plan community land development. And one reason my brother Don and I love land is because it's a blank canvas.
Yeah.
And as a blank canvas, how creative can you be? What can you create? And so that's why we got into it. And also too, it's not easy to price, because a lot of people don't like land, and because in the 80s, land devalued 90%.
Yeah,
90%, and so that was quite a learning experience.
Okay, then how do you price it today? Like, if it's not easy, what's your secret sauce?
See, I wrote down you're going to ask secret sauce.
You don't have to give up the whole bag, but how do you think about valuing land?
Well, all real estate's valued by its future cash flow discounted down to present value.
Yep.
And whether that's an office building, a retail center, whatever it may be, what's the cash flow? And if you buy an office building, or we don't want to talk about office right now. That's not good.
Yeah.
that's an asset
dirty
class.
word.
Yeah, that's not good. But if you buy anything that's income producing, then you've got a choice. You either decrease expenses, or the only thing you can do to increase your sales price is cap rates fall, or you decrease your expenses or increase your revenue.
Yeah.
So that's not super creative for us. We like to develop. So we like to be the ones who create the value, take the land and create value. And the secret sauce is we try to, let me tell you what a master plan community is. I guess that's the best thing. We also build subdivisions. Yeah. And there are thousands of subdivisions in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, but not that many master plan communities. So number one, the competition's less. Now you go to Houston, Florida, California, everything's a master plan community.
Right. What's the difference between a subdivision master plan community?
A subdivision is in just lots. Horizontal infrastructure, and then a builder comes in and puts houses on it.
Okay.
Master plan community is usually a much larger piece of property with amenities. They can be swimming pools, golf courses, a lot of restrictions. HOAs are usually very active with full-time staff. And what we focus on with our HOAs is social fabric. How do we have activities? Like, for instance, in one of our communities, I added up one time, we have a little magnet refrigerator, with all the dates for activities. And it was 41 or 2 different weekend activities. So
Wow.
everyone can pick and choose. So we like to say that we are the best at social fabrics in kind of the DFW area and creating HOAs that are active. We have committees and I think if individuals are familiar with their HOA docs, and most are not, because they're like 70 pages, we are fairly restrictive. And the purpose of the documents is to outline the governing structure of how the community is going to operate. So we put in their term limits that the board has to get off. We don't want it run by people who have professional HOA careers. So I will put that some of the dues as a percentage of what the dues are to the HOA, and hours are anywhere from $1,000 to $1,500 a year. Not very expensive, really.
Yeah.
And that comes with all the landscaping, maintenance, and pools and swimming pools, sometimes lifeguards, et cetera. But a certain percentage of that has to be spent on social activities and marketing the community in perpetuity, so that it creates value. And this is interesting. I tell this to cities when. As you know, cities have code enforcers, right? Code inspectors, and they go out and they say, "Oh, your weeds are too high," and they give you a ticket and stuff like that. Well, I tell the city managers that we meet with, because we build cities. By the way, we've built about 20,000 single family lots over the last 30, 35 years, which is 40, 50,000 people. And our communities will have anywhere from 1,500 to 3,000 home sites. And it'll take anywhere from 10 years to 20 years to build them out. But we don't call them code enforcement. We have the HOA individuals who go out and check for landscaping. Mainly, it seems like landscaping, or they'll paint their house purple or something they're not supposed to do. They put yard art. No yard art. We don't like yard art in the front. You can do anything you want in the back. So we don't call them code enforcement. We call them value enhancers.
Yeah.
So their job is to create value.
Yeah. Okay, so if you're taking like what's in that HOA doc, there's probably a lot of lessons you learned over the years that you're like, okay, don't do this, do more of this. What's something that you should not invest in when doing a master plan community, and what's something that you should invest more in when you're doing a master plan community?
Well, Chris, that's a great question. I think that an individual who's looking to create a master plan community, and they can be small.
Yeah.
With a lot of, like a high-end custom home market.
Yeah.
We don't sell to custom home builders over the years. Very, very rare. Mainly production builders. And this because the financial model is very sensitive to the velocity of the sales.
Got it.
So we only sell, we build all the horizontal. We don't build vertical, which is the houses. We did it one time and that didn't work too well. So we just build horizontal and sell to mainly production builders. And when I say production, it's builders who can start 50 homes a year up to 200 or 300.
Yep.
And have good credit. And so it's without that velocity, when we have those kind of lots, 2,000 lots, we'd be there forever. And custom builders are very slow because it takes them a year to build a house, a year and a half. And you have to sell retail to a homeowner, someone. And so the production builders can build a house in 6 months.
How do you select which? I'm assuming like when you're doing all these lots, there's probably a ton of production builders at one end. What's the selection process? Like, how do you figure out who's going to be in which communities?
Well, it is a little bit difficult because certain builders work better with other builders.
Okay.
And some builders are not invited to the party because of the way they operate.
Yeah.
And some builders work on larger profit margins than others. Some builders work on more velocity.
Yeah.
And less profit margin. And you asked about the secret sauce. So here's the secret. I was going to tell you the secret sauce. It's not that secret. Is that we started off in the business. We got our start from the RTC.
Yeah.
Because we went broke and we would go to these auctions. And RTC is a resolution trust. Do you want to hear all this?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
It's all good.
Okay. Well, when everybody went broke in the 80s and the young people, and you're just still probably too young to remember that. And the government was foreclosing on all the property because what happened and how the government get the property was they took over the banks.
Okay. So
the banks went broke. The government would take over the bank and they would have bad loans and bad assets. And the assets, a lot of times, the banks were at that time fairly eager to foreclose on their loans and take back the property so they could resell it. Well, they realized that that's not such a great idea. They didn't want to be in the real estate business, banks. And so the government came in and created an entity to take all these bad loans and all these foreclosed assets, real estate mainly, and put it into one entity. And it was the Resolution Trust Corporation. And the best thing the government ever did was say it's a 3-year life. After 3 years, we're selling all of this. Because then you knew there was a bottom, right? No one wants to catch a falling knife.
Yeah.
So they always say, where's the bottom? Where's the bottom? As soon as, and I take this economist, and his name's Linneman, and he's got the greatest quote. And I want to borrow. He says, greed will always surpass fear. So everybody's waiting, to get greedy, where's the bottom? And so the government was liquidating all their assets. We didn't have any money. We didn't have no money whatsoever. My brother and I, we'd go to these auctions, and there were live auctions and sometimes sealed bids, and you'd put your offer down. But they would always give you 60 days, just like today. You buy a piece of real estate, 60-day look, 30-day close, something like that. Well, in that 60-day period, we would run all over town to Syntax, Pulte, and all the different production builders and saying, we're buying lots. And so we would go to these savings and loans, which they don't exist anymore. I think your audience, some of them listening, never even know what a savings and loan is. And so they'd be selling these assets, and they'd be huge, like 500 lots subdivision. And so we would flip out to Syntax, 200, Pulte 100, and try to keep some free and clear. And that's how we got our start in the single family lot business. And then and we bought acreage with partners, and then we would develop that acreage and got into the master plan community business that way.
Okay, but what's the secret sauce?
Oh, the secret sauce. I forgot.
How do you price
well, we try to have the same lot price as the competition.
Okay.
Buying other builders go down the road and buy lots, same lot price, but with greater amenities, a better HOA, more landscaping, and more marketing, a way to market the community that others don't, because it's we charge a marketing fee to the builders. And so we get on social media and have websites and all, like everybody does. But that was it, just to have a better product at the same price as the competition.
Okay. So I kind of we're going to use this as like the time, because you said some of these deals take 10 to 20 years.
Yes.
So I want to kind of have this conversation in a way that's kind of this ongoing timeline. So obviously you have to find a piece of land to buy.
Okay, sure.
Y'all are just in DFW, right?
Correct. Now we've had property in Austin and we had a couple ski resorts at one time and did all that. But I would mainly DFW, correct.
But I'd imagine right now there's only so many big blocks of land around the metroplex. You probably know of all of them. So what is the process to buy land? Like, how long are you after a piece of land before it's under contract? Is this years in the making, or is it just a listing comes up and you make a bid, or is it both?
It's both. It's we seldom win the bids.
Yep.
I seldom. And there's a lot of reasons for that. We've learned over the years, even in the 08, 09 time period when there was a lot of property for sale.
Yeah.
It's seldom that we would win, because our experience level is we know the problems with the property and how long it can really take.
Yeah.
And we usually don't have partners. We don't have any partners, so it's our money.
Yeah.
So we have to be very cautious. And we know basically the bumps, and then we call them trap doors. And other people in the business don't, because they're generating fees. So if I'm a fee builder, my job is to go out and find a deal as fast as possible, get investors, and then drive a bunch of fees and develop the property.
Okay.
And so we usually don't win those bids. We just find off-market property.
Okay.
So we would get ownership maps out.
Yep.
Over the last 20, 30 years, look for landowners that look for large tracts of land, contact the landowner. And like you said, it could take a year, it could take 2 years or 4 years, and talk them into eventually selling the property.
Is there a minimum size you'll buy, or is there a certain sweet spot of acreage that you're looking for?
No. Well, we try to buy at least 200 or 300 acres.
Okay.
And we can buy, like we recently have acquired, now we're up to 2,000, and we're buying another 500, adding on 2,500 acres in Midlothian, Grand Prairie.
Why is 200 or 300 the magic? Is there anything magic to that size?
It's a lot of work.
Yeah.
And with 300, so here's the math. It's about 4 houses per acre, 3 to 4.
Okay.
So that would give you just enough synergy to support an HOA, like with the swimming pool. Without 1,000 homes, it's difficult to have the dues where they need to be so that you can support a nice amenity package.
Okay, so the size is one thing. What are just other kind of boxes you're looking to check on a piece of land? Like it's out of the floodplain, it's near infrastructure, good school district. Like, how do you know you've kind of checked all the boxes? What are those boxes?
I think it's really more, we can overcome a lot of problem. We end up buying problem property. We bought like, two different large tracts that were next to landfills and overcame that. The one that comes to mind the most is Viridian in Arlington. Oh my gosh.
Legendary.
Talk about problem property.
Really?
Oh my gosh. We had to move like 5 million yards of dirt. It was all in the floodplain. It was next to strip joints. It was next to a landfill. And my wife said, no, Mom, it's going to come by a house here and drive by those places up the road on 157. And I said, I think we can overcome that. You have to be an optimist in this business, right? It was so bad. There were seagulls coming off that landfill next to us and landing in our lake that we were building. We had to rent falconers.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so they could hold the falcons, scare the seagulls off. So we've had a lot of challenges over the years, and the edges. And when you get urban property, basically large tracts left over, they're left over for reasons.
Yep.
And those usually have the most potential for appreciation. They've been picked over. People have gone broke on them. We're the third owner in this property, the Viridian property, and everybody had gone broke before us. And so, to answer your question, the boxes are really what's it going to cost to get the property ready to go and entitled and then ready to go? And what can we sell the lots for? What kind of volume can we create? And then we discount back.
And you're selling what I'd call more affordable homes. You're not looking to, are you doing multi-million-dollar developments, or is everything pretty much priced affordably?
It's usually first or second time buyers or third time buyers.
Okay.
Right. But not the big $1 million mansions. We have some of that, but that's not our bread and butter.
Are you working, do you do incentives of any kind with the state, with the city?
Yes. Oh, great question. Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. And that's what I want to make sure your audience is aware of. There are a lot of various incentives out there, or ways to what we call triple Ps, public-private partnerships.
Yep.
And many, in fact, we're kind of the leader in North Texas on public-private partnerships.
Okay.
Yeah. So that's our secret sauce also.
How does that whole process work?
Oh, that's complicated. Back in the late 1900s, the legislature in Texas set up what's called municipal utility districts.
Yeah.
And Highland Park, University Park, some of the first master plan communities were municipal utility districts. And it's because the cities weren't established. They didn't have the ability to finance infrastructure.
Right.
So a developer finances the infrastructure, builds the sewer plants, like we built sewer treatment plants, elevated storage, we call water towers. We do all that. And we get reimbursed through the sale of bonds. We create a government entity, and there's a board that's elected by the homeowners. And then there's a tax on the property, and they sell bonds, the district does, and reimburse the developer for the infrastructure.
So you do MUDs?
Yes.
Do you do anything else? Oh,
there's a lot of acronyms out there.
Yeah.
There's MUDs, MMDs, PIDs, TIRFs, TIFs, TERSs.
So do you have a full-time, I don't know if it's general counsel or just somebody on your team that's just working on that specific thing all the time?
Yes.
Do you have to stay up to date with legislation, or is it all pretty much stayed the same for the last few decades? Or is there always something new being added?
Always something new being added.
Okay.
Yeah. And the legislature in Texas, creates cities and the authority that cities have.
Yeah.
So it's very natural for any governmental entity to always want more power and to gain more power. And it's the same for individuals. That's a fairly addictive drug, power. And it's very, very rare that you see individuals who are not addicted to that drug once they get it. So the cities have constantly battling developers.
Yeah.
And for all kinds of reasons. And so the legislature says, hey, whoa, wait a second, slow down. Let's let's level out the playing field.
Yeah.
And so in the most recent legislation, it was effective last September, and the legislature only meets every 2 years, as you know. They told the cities basically, And the cities are now getting the picture. Cities have a lobby organization, and they use taxpayer money, yours and my money, when we pay our city taxes, property taxes or sales taxes, to hire lobbyists. And they use it through a group called Texas Municipal League, TML. And they spend $20-30 million a year lobbying in Austin to get more power and to protect the city's turf. And that's kind of ticked off a lot of Republicans and people who say that's just not right. You can't use taxpayer money to pass laws to limit, what developers or individuals can do. So last legislative session, the legislature passed a couple of laws that cities are just wigged out about. I mean, freaked out. I mean, like going to court and just you can't do that. Well, of course, the legislature can do anything it wants.
Yeah.
So good luck on that. So it was it's a little complicated, but cities had a boundary, city limits.
Yeah.
All cities. And that depends on what kind of city and how large that boundary is. And outside of that boundary was what's called extraterritorial jurisdiction. Yeah. Cities have the authority to regulate certain things in that ETJ.
Okay.
And so they were kind of exceeding their authority and forcibly annexing property. So 4 years ago, the legislature said you can't forcibly annex property anymore. Cities would go out and back in the 70s and 60s, 1960s, 1970s, and 80s, the cities would strip annex down highways to give speeding tickets. So, right. So the city revenue could come in. They would annex just the highway.
Yeah.
Right. It was a state highway. So the state said, no, you can't strip annex anymore. So that stopped that. And then the city would go out and give a lot of speeding tickets. And the state said, no. Selma down near San Antonio was 70-90% of their city revenue was speeding tickets. And they said, no, you can't have more than X percent of your revenue from tickets. So all of these things. And the cities would set speed limits. I'm just dumping on cities right now. And they would set speed limits, at 20 miles an hour, and around a corner or something. So they gave more speeding tickets. And the state said, no. You can't go below 30 unless it's a park or a school. So the state's constantly reeling in these local governments.
Yep.
And so, and back to where you were, the state said, okay, landowners, you don't have to be in the ETJ of that city if you don't want to be. You can disannex yourself from the city's authority in that area. And so that's a big deal now going on with cities fighting that and landowners saying, okay, I'm out. I don't want any part of the city.
Is there, when you're doing these, is there already established school districts in these areas, or are you kind of by coming in going to help establish a school district?
Wow, that's a great question.
I've got tons for you.
No, this is like, so sometime, and I'm not sure when, Chris, but sometime in the 1940s, I think, maybe it was the 30s, the state had, and I always wondered this, and we figured it out. You said Dallas Independent School District, independent school, all of them are called independent. And what is that about? Well, of course, why wouldn't they just say school district?
Yeah.
Well, early in the 20th century, it was school districts by the county.
Yeah.
This county, that county. And for some reason, legislature changed it and created these and divided the state up 100%. There's no gaps that school district A meets school district B, like Rockwall runs into, Plano school district. And the school district boundaries follow creeks, they follow county lines, it used to be old city limits lines, they follow property lines. They're completely across the board. They could be anywhere.
Yeah.
So no, we don't create school districts, but we do work very extensively with the school districts.
Yeah.
Yeah. And we help them with architecture because sometimes they're not very creative.
Yeah.
And we have a theme going in the community. We say, whoa, wait a second. You can't put that here, but we would like to work with you, and we'll sometimes pay extra. Sometimes we give them the land. Sometimes we sell it at a discount and help them be a little more creative in their thought process, especially with landscaping. They're not big on landscaping.
Is landscaping big? Is it critical?
For us, it is. Yeah.
Why?
Well, if you ask realtors, a street that's shaded by big trees always is going to sell for more than a street that's not.
Really?
Yeah. So we look at sidewalks. All of our sidewalks are 5 feet from the very beginning of our business 30 years ago. Now all the cities require 5 feet. And that's
5 foot wide?
5 foot wide. Yeah. I'm sorry. 5. And then you can kind of walk side by side in 5 feet. 6 is better. 4, you cannot. So
Okay.
one person has to walk in the grass,
Yeah.
unless you're by yourself. So that's how it came
You've
about.
thought through these things.
Yes.
Even 1 foot of a sidewalk. That's
All
funny.
the details. I didn't even tell you.
Oh, we're going to get into them.
That's our secret sauce too. Is our level of detail is just crazy. And anyway, it's too much.
Yeah,
it's too much because you can't go do other deals if you're bogged down in the weeds.
Yeah,
right. But what are we talking about?
Well, we were talking about. I asked you about landscaping, and I just said how important it is. And you said,
the schools. We talked about the schools. So we work with school districts extensively, and like in Viridian, in that community, we HEB is the school district, and it was their first multi-level elementary school.
Really?
And they have, elevator, and it was just a big deal for them. But they were very creative. They worked with us. We were very fortunate to have a school district that was open-minded back in 2012 and 13. And the school's excellent. I think it's one of the best schools. Oh, I got to tell you this about Viridian. This is really cool. I found this out just the other day. I was at a function, and this guy came up to me and said, "Did you know what the assessed valuation?" We sold Viridian in 2016. We had partners.
Yeah.
We started it and bought it in 2006 and went through the worst part of the recession, did all that. And that's another story. But so we sold in 2016. Partners said, we're lucky to make this kind of money, so we're out. We didn't have a choice. And I said, no, I haven't heard, no, because some other people took it over. He said, when you started Viridian, the assessed valuation of that floodplain land was $8 million. I said, oh, yeah, that's fine. He said, that was 2009 or 10. He said, you know what it was last year? I said, no, I don't know what the assessed valuation was. He said $2.1 billion.
God dang. That's
$2.1 billion. Yeah. So I said, well, I'm going to put that on our website. So I thought that was pretty cool.
All right. Well, then.
So we work with the school districts, all of them.
Yeah. We're not going to skip over that story. So you bought this piece of land in 2006. The world's humming.
Mm-hmm.
What happened? How far along in the project were you when 08, 09 hit? And do you stop the project or you just keep building through it?
We never had started.
Okay.
We were still in the entitlement process. And when I say entitlements, that's sometimes that's hard for people to understand. What does that mean?
Yeah.
And what that means is the local governments control every aspect of land that's in their city. And when I say every aspect, that's how you develop it, what the road widths are, the thickness of the pavement, landscaping requirements, zoning is the big one, and whether or not you can create these acronyms we talked about, the PIDs, the MUDs, and all of that.
Yeah.
All of those tax public-private partnerships. And so we had to go through that process with Arlington. And what happens is it takes a long time for the cities to trust you.
Yep.
You have to build a rapport. And they've had so many developers come in, especially on this piece of property, when two others come in and promised the world and both went broke and never delivered. So we try to always underpromise and overdeliver.
Yep.
So our reputation is important so that when we go to another city, they can say, oh, look what Huffines has done. They're great developers. They overdeliver. And so that's important to us. So that's what took 2 or 3 years.
Yep.
And then in 2010, at the very depths of the recession, we didn't have no banks were loaning money for real estate, but we were able to sell bonds up front, which is like, this was a public improvement district bond, and it only been done a few times up front in the city, and some individuals we know who are in the bond business came to our office, and good friends of the family, and said, "Don't do that. What are you doing? In all this." And I said, "Well, we're going to do it. It's going to be successful." The interest rate on those bonds for the audience is pretty fun. It was about a 6-month window where rates just jumped up. Well, you sell them and it's public bid. People bid on the bonds, and you got to take the low interest rate. It was 9.75 tax-free.
Oh my God.
Tax-free. And I said, dude. So I told my mother, I said, she's, was a widow woman at the time. And I said, you need to buy some of these. Yeah. So my mother-in-law bought some. And so anyway, turned out to be a great deal.
It's incredible. All right. So you buy a piece of land. How long does it typically take to entitle? I know the government, over time that probably getting longer and longer than it used to be in the 80s and 90s. But as we sit today, how long do you spend not just on entitlements, but like designing the whole thing? Do you guys have a playbook for each one already where you're just kind of moving puzzle pieces, or is each one kind of a fresh start?
Each one's a clean canvas.
Yeah.
Because of access points, whether it's on the freeway, where it's located, how do you get to the property? Where's the center hub of the community going to be located? All of those are unique to that specific piece of property. And sometimes we do smaller lots. Sometimes we do bigger lots. Sometimes they're rear entry like alleys. Sometimes they're front entry with the streets and the garages on the front.
Yeah.
And the entitlement process with the city normally takes at least 18 months to 2 years.
Yeah. And then the planning with the architects.
We usually do that at the same time.
Okay, you're doing it at the same time.
The land plan and the architectural part, because the city wants to know how it's going to develop. So you have to kind of do that. Then you kind of work through that as you go with the city on what they want, what they don't.
What's the ratio of like costs in amenities and public spaces versus costs in lots? Like, are you always trying to hit that number, or is it different for each one?
Different for each one.
Okay.
MPCs, master plan communities, you spend anywhere from $10,000 to $20,000 per lot on amenities.
Okay.
So we try to be in the middle, 15 to 20.
Yeah.
And that's everything. The main boulevards, landscaping, the entry feature. Like in the community, we just opened last year. We had a grand opening this year, Salterra and Mesquite.
Okay.
We built a tree house, and that's unique. Don and I, we are not widget builders. Yeah. If someone else has done it, we don't want to do it.
Yeah.
And I advise that for anyone looking to get into business. If a person's thinking they're going to get into business and they're going to beat the competition, you got to be unique. You got to have a niche, some way that you're doing something different. Because there's a lot of fray out there. There's a lot of competition. So there's Treehouse. We hired Treehouse masters that used to be on TV.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and I never saw the show, but everybody talked about it. And so they came, and we had this giant. We still have it. It's a 48-inch, 50-inch red oak native. I mean, it's just giant. And I said, we've got to do something special with this tree. So they came out and designed this treehouse. The treehouse was $650,000.
Holy cow!
And then we spent another $500,000 in the park around it, put a bridge across a creek and everything. It's just gorgeous. And so as part of an amenity, you were kind of asking about that. Yeah. And so we designed this promenade to go from the clubhouse across a lake that we built. Of course, we stock them with trophy bass because we think fishing is a great family exercise.
Yeah.
And in some of the communities, we have Zebco comes out and gives out rods and reels, and we have prizes. We put a tag in the bottom of the fish and let some go. If they catch the one that's tagged, they get like a TV and stuff, all the prizes.
I've never heard of that. You can tag fish?
Yeah, I let them, and then the fish guy comes out and lets them go the day 2 weeks before. I said, don't feed them.
Yeah.
Like I'm hungry.
How much does the entrance matter on these things? Because people put a lot of money into the drive up.
Entrance is a big deal for us.
Yeah.
Some communities don't. It's the thought process in the last 5 or 6 years on amenities is make it low key and exclusive, like a Four Seasons or something. And then people can kind of just show up.
Yeah.
Yeah. You don't want to blast it.
Yeah.
I'm more of the blaster. I want people to be proud when they drive in, like so for 30 years, we try to make sure that everyone is remembering they're in a master plan community in this name. For instance, on all the mailbox, we put the logos on every mailbox.
Yeah.
And all the street signs are custom. They have a logo on every street sign where it says the street. That takes forever to negotiate with the cities. Well, you have to use our street sign. No, we're not using your street sign.
Yeah.
You're not using that little metal pole.
Yeah.
These are custom wrought iron poles and they all look good. So, and we try to put water at the entrance of our communities.
Yeah.
So that there's just calming, you kind of take a deep breath when you arrive in one of our communities. There's a water fountain blowing water and there's an entrance and they just take pride in that they're home.
I freaking love it. I was looking at your communities the other day. I think Heartland was one of them.
Yes.
And you have this huge sign over the entry that says Heartland.
Right.
And I remember talking to a developer years ago, and he just said something. He's like, there's something about human nature that when you drive under it, like you feel like you've entered a new world. Like there's a huge value in having something that goes over the road. And he showed me all these examples. And so now every time I drive through something where it's just like a sign, once I get to the other side of it, it's like, yeah, I kind of do feel like I'm in a new place, even though it's just driving under, a sign.
And usually from that moment on, there's extensive landscaping.
Yep.
Yeah. Like a resort.
So I kind of asked it earlier, but then there's like pool and amenity center, maybe tennis courts, pickleball.
Yeah. Of course, pickleball.
You got to be doing pickleball.
Pickleball is on fire, stays on fire. And so in the new communities, we're putting in 8. We're putting in 2 covered pickleball courts. And
do you do golf courses or no?
We did initially back in Rowlett and Waterview Golf Course.
Why'd you stop?
Well, first, the idea on a golf course, if you're a developer, is that you're going to get premiums on the golf course. Yeah. And that'll make up for some of the land. The land is about 180 acres you got to give up. A lot of communities, NPCs, give up floodplain, and then the golf course floods. At Viridian, we bought the golf course next to us, Riverside, that one that's inexpensive. Yeah. And the idea was to bring it up into the community, across the river and all that. But we've done golf courses. The premiums aren't that great. A lot of people don't want to live on golf course because of the balls and people in their backyard and things of that nature.
Yeah.
And, but it does establish and kind of give you a bell cow, so to speak, for the community. We did it with the city of Rowlett back in the year 99, 2000. And it's successful. That it's a city golf course, and we paid for it and donated it to the city. But the amount of land you have to give up is usually not. The numbers don't usually work.
Yeah. On programming these things, so you've mentioned like lots of events and everything. Do you is that run by the HOA, or do you basically have like a events business or like a hospitality company that comes in and runs all these events and makes sure that they're executed flawlessly? That seems like it's one thing to build lots and build infrastructure and build a vision. It's another thing to coordinate all these events. It seems like 2 different kind of things that you're working on there.
True. The management companies have experience with the events and run it. So in our communities, we'll have the minimum, depends on the size, but 3 or 4 to 5, 8 people. In Heartland, I think there's staff at 20, 15.
Wow.
So they can segregate out duties and keep people in, maintenance people to, we have social clubs, committees in the communities. And so I'm kind of smiling about it because I thought it was kind of fun. I told the social chairmen, the HOA management company, that you have social chairmen and you have to appoint them, and they have to write an article for the newspaper, electronic newspaper, every 6 months. And of course, they have to take photos of every event. Everyone likes to see themselves at the event, in a photo, right? And with their kids, you're dressed up with, costumes and color and everything. And so that's a big deal because they get the budget. The social committee gets to spend money. So a lot of times it's all managed by the homeowners themselves.
And they get to come up with the events and,
right. The management company guides them, helps them, and takes care of the stuff that they don't want to do. But it's mainly volunteers.
It's amazing. I've never really been in that business. This is like the tiniest microcosm, but I used to own rentals in college.
Yeah.
And one of the things we would do in the leases, we would promise to bring pizza during finals, and then we would deliver pumpkins during Halloween.
Yeah.
And you couldn't believe like how that was a needle mover to sign a lease. It's like, wait, you're going to bring us pizza and pumpkins. And I remember thinking like, man, you just have to be thoughtful and think about the person in the building. Yes. And so I can imagine most of your life is just spent putting yourself in that person's shoes and then kind of thinking about how their life and raising kids is going to unfold. That's kind of cool.
It is cool. It's a lot of fun. It's the greatest joy we get. Like we will sit, Don and I would go to parks and just sit and see what the kids play on. Not our stuff, but cities, parks, different parks. And what type of equipment do they like?
So you bought the land, you've planned it. How many sets of plans do you go through? I mean, you've done this now for 30 years. Is usually the product what you envision first, or is it still like, I can't believe this is what we ended up with? I thought it would be totally different.
You mean after we build the roads?
Well, I'm just
that's a problem. Well, it's on paper, we could change it. But
I'm saying while it's on paper, because you're probably walking the land while you're buying it, kind of envisioning what it's going to be. But then you might go into planning and it's totally flipped around. Or y'all at a point now where you pretty much know what you're getting as you go into planning.
I'm laughing because we have this project in Grand Prairie, with 2,000 plus acres, and we had it all planned. I mean, 100% ready to go. We were talking to builders about buying. We got our entitlements from Grand Prairie, And 2 weeks ago, we said, we got to change the plan.
Oh, my.
and the team at the office just says there's nothing final at Huffines until it's final.
Yeah.
And it's never final until it's actually almost under construction and we're designing it. So it's always getting better. You know, when we make changes, I think we're making changes for the better. And I don't think most developers do that because most developers are on a timeline and the timeline's super tight because of the IRR, right? You got to have that IRR and every month it's going down, especially in this business because you got 2 years of zeros.
Yeah.
So we don't have partners. So we just say, how can this be better all the time? That's all we ask. What would make this better?
Okay. You don't have to share specific. I know it's a private project, but to the extent you could maybe at a high level, like what would you have seen after planning the whole 2,000 acres that with 2 weeks to go, we kind of got to change this? Is it an amenity? Is it like, what would you have spotted 2 weeks before that?
It was a road that was unnecessary, which was costing $10 million.
Yeah.
And we could get the same benefit with another road that was also going in. The other road really wasn't serving any purpose.
Yeah.
And we had a lot of townhomes planned for that property.
Yeah.
And townhomes right now are dead. Yeah. No one wants to build townhomes.
Why?
Well, it's because home prices were escalating after COVID, right?
Yeah.
And so to make things affordable, you had this stair step, small houses, small lots, and then townhomes. Townhomes is a starting product for a lot of people. And two things happened in townhomes. One is they got more expensive to build and more expensive on the insurance. You kind of mentioned that. So insurance has gone sky high. And so the insurance costs in townhomes for the HOA dues, because they have to have a separate due. The HOA takes care of the townhomes, the roof, the common areas, the side of the building and everything. Yeah. They have to have a separate insurance policy, separate dues for that. And it's gotten expensive. So a homeowner can almost be in a 30-foot wide house detached for the same monthly payment as a townhome.
Okay.
So that's it. So we had to get rid of that, change that. And the amenities changed because we've got another tract that's contiguous. I mean, part of this property is in another city, Midlothian, and it has a big 100-acre lake on it. And we think that we can get Midlothian to work with us. It's been 2 years and we haven't. But at some point in the future, Midlothian's going to work with us. We're going to move some of the amenities in that area.
Okay. And just for anybody listening, and I used to do development, not near like this, but when I hear taking a road out of a plan that's already baked, some people might be thinking, oh, you just go to the plans, make an edit, and a week later you're back to good. What does it take to make a change of taking out a road? Is this weeks, months, years?
It'll set the project back probably at least 4 months, 3-4 months.
Yeah. You really are a developer. Because only a developer's like, yeah, it's just 3 or 4 months. We're going to take the road out, get going. And especially not having partners is such an advantage. You can be thoughtful.
Oh, yeah, you couldn't do it. Could not do it.
Yeah.
We've had partners. No. And our business is there's cost overruns here. We save money over there. And when we had these private equity guys come in and they give us their pitch and their proposal, we'll fund you, but this is how we operate. And because they want cookie cutter, right?
Yeah.
It's just the nature of the business. And we look at those docs and we can't do that. I mean, they have all kinds of docs, and we had partners in Viridian. And of course we went through a very bad time, 08, 09.
Yeah.
And so they were constantly pulling out the partnership doc and reading it. And I told the guys, I said, look, if you're pulling out a partnership doc, I don't want to be partners.
Yeah.
That's just it. I don't even know what it says, right? But we were careful in what we signed, of course.
Yeah.
But look, if you're having to try to interpret all, 99 pages of that partnership doc, what's the right thing to do? I said, let's just sit here and work it out.
Yeah.
And that's not how somebody from Boston and the East Coast operate. That's not. So we just say, okay, we're done.
I had a gentleman on the other day from New York City. I think I asked him, I'm like, part of the sport of real estate in New York is getting lawyers involved. It's like part of the process.
Yeah, well, we're out on that.
Yeah. That's not how we do it in Texas.
No.
Okay. How long does it take to put in the infrastructure? Are you putting it in all up front, or are you phasing it in over that 10 or 20 years?
Phasing it in, of course.
Okay.
Yeah. So we'll, like in the what we call Lake Song, that community down in Grand Prairie.
Yeah.
is we'll build 500-600 home sites all at one time. And that part goes in all at once with the amenities.
Yeah.
And the basic part of the amenities. And we'll add on to the amenities as we go.
Okay. And you're in these things for 10 to 20 years?
Yeah. Most of them.
I don't even know what to ask about that. That's just a long time to be involved. I guess it's, are you less and less involved as time goes by, or like the job just kind of changes as time goes by? What are you doing in years like 10 to 20?
Oh, that's a great, I just never thought about it that way. It's just, to us, it's like it becomes a business.
Yeah.
You got phase 10, phase 9 or whatever. And then we planned another amenity over here, like another pool, or the school's going over there. So we just continue to expand and go get builders and build the new sections.
And to get a school, do you just go to that school district and say, hey, we're building 3,500 new homes here. Probably be good to put a school here. And you already have the site for them? Or how does it work to get a school in your community?
Well, to get the actual construction of the school is different than we work with them on the site.
Okay.
So we go and say, look, we're planning this site. Is this site going to work for you? And they'll say yes or no for whatever reason.
Yeah.
And some of the new school districts like Midlothian want, at the time last year, I think they got a new superintendent, so it changes. But they wanted a elementary, middle, and high school all in one site.
Yeah.
Which we like. We like that because I like the fact that high schoolers can then go tutor the elementary school kids, and be part of that whole process. They see that whole growing up process. They're not isolated by their age or grade level. But anyway, so that the bond issue failed.
Yeah. Okay.
So that failed.
But are they building the schools on your land, or
No, they buy the land.
They buy the land from you?
Yeah, they buy the land.
Okay. And do you always know that when you're buying a certain size property, you have to plan for a school, that the city is going to have to buy a school site from you? Or does that come as you're planning?
Comes as we're planning,
Okay.
and the school districts are totally independent of the cities.
Yeah.
Some cities work more closely with their school districts than others.
Yeah. Okay, let's spend just a little bit of time talking about the market. What's it like right now in your world? Like, what comes to mind when I say what's going on in the market?
Well, it's kind of like when I first sat down before we got on the air. I think this is a great time for our business. Master plan communities, single family lot development. This is a great time.
Interesting.
Isn't it? It's really, I'm not ironic or, it's just weird because you got high interest rates, fairly high interest rates, but yet there is such a pent up housing demand. And what's happened, of course, as you've heard, and I'm sure you've heard on your show from other participants, that no one wants to give up their 3% mortgage, right? So the existing home market's locked up. And so it's very hard to get someone to sell their existing home because what are they going to do?
Yep.
And so that, for instance, I think I want to make sure more or less I got these numbers right. And like 2018, new homes accounted for about 14, 15, 16% of sales of homes, new homes. Now it's 30%.
Wow.
Because you can't buy an existing home. No one's selling. And so that's really helped our business. Also, if you looked at home builder stocks, because I know you have a lot of guests who keep up with equities, and home building stocks have doubled, tripled in the last 2-3 years. So they're flush with money and cash. And so they're making a lot of deals to prepare for the future because they have the ability to do that. Home builders, publicly traded, and even privates. And so in our business, normally we would sell, say, 400 lots to, say, pick a number, 4 builders.
Yeah.
And they would buy 25, 50 at the first, when we finish construction and they approve everything, they buy 25 or 50. And then over the next year or two, they would buy the other 50 as they sold houses.
Yep.
Today they can come in and they'll buy 100, 150 for cash. We finish the construction, they just take them down. Or even more advantageous to our business, land development business, they'll buy 50 acres and go build the lots. We'll build them for them, but they pay for it. The capital in the MPCs is massive requirement, the capital requirement.
Yep.
Because we have to borrow money to build the lots, borrow money to buy the land, and borrow money to build everything. And then our income comes in incrementally as they buy their lots.
What's their incentive to just buy 50 raw acres and have you do it for them? Why wouldn't they just wait? They get a little bit of a discount for buying
They get a discount, and that's the competition pushing the deals. So in order to be competitive in the marketplace, to go get a lot of lot position, that's the only way a lot of developers will sell it now.
And for the most part, most of the big builders won't hold raw land or land on their balance sheet for long. They kind of want something finished or something that's being active.
How'd you know that? Yeah, that's correct. And so they've come up with ways to do that.
Yeah.
And it's called land bankers.
Yeah.
So they'll buy the land from us, and then they finance it with a land banker and pay them a pretty high interest rate to do the same thing we used to do, which is to hold the land and develop the lots.
Do you have any preference or care about working with a private home builder versus a public, or they're all different?
Privates have a lot more flexibility.
Yeah.
Publics, I think by GAAP accounting principles, cannot put down more than 20% in earnest money.
Yeah.
So I think your audience knows earnest money. You buy a piece, you tie it up with 18% down.
Yeah.
Privates can put 30, 40% down.
Yeah.
And we like as much earnest money down as possible so that if something happens on a macro event and they want to get out of the deal, they got a lot invested. So it makes it more difficult.
What does a typical lot takedown contract look like? You were explaining like they might take 400, they'll start with 50 and then they'll keep going. How does that contract usually read? 20 to 30, 40% up front for those first 50.
Mm-hmm.
And then as soon as they close that, do they have to put 20, 30, 40, 50% down for the next 50?
No, that's a great question.
Rolling?
Yeah, it works like this. So if they're going to buy 100 lots from us, we can say it's a public, so 20% earnest money.
Yeah, on all 100.
All 100. And then we go get the loan and build the lots, put in all the streets, infrastructure, water, sewer, amenities, and turnkey it to them and deliver all 100 to them. And then their contract will say, I'll buy 25 upon completion of the initial construction.
Yeah.
And then 6 months later, I'll buy another 25. 90 days later, I'll buy another 15. 90 days later, another 15. Their earnest money we hold until the end.
Got it.
So, because all our profit in this business, the profit's really a third. Third in the land, a third in the development, and a third profit.
What's the third in the development mean?
And the infrastructure cost to build everything. So about a third of the cost that the builders pay us, our cost of goods, is in the land. And then about a third or 40% now, because construction costs have gone up, is in the construction of the lots and the infrastructure.
Yeah.
Streets, all that stuff, water, sewer, water towers, all that. And then the rest, 30% is profit. So our profits at the end of the deals. That's why private equity is seldom in this business.
Yeah.
And a lot of people don't like the business, but the multiples are really strong.
For sure.
Really strong. But the IRRs, they're okay.
Yeah.
Because you can't turn it quick.
Right.
But the multiples are huge because you lever into it.
And right now is like the demand is kind of as far as you can see right now, like builders will take any lots they can get at this point because there's no existing home selling.
Well, it's not quite that good.
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, we have to still go out and sell it and convince them that, this is a great spot. And they know the marketplace very well.
Yeah.
And most of these builders will have, Chris, I think they'll have 15 to 30 different subdivisions they're building in the DFW area. Well, I want to give this data point to you because you asked about land. And so DFW, it's a big market. I've measured it. It's about 85 miles across West Fort Worth to Royce City, east. Big market. North-south's big. But DFW, and for the last several years, since 2006, has averaged about 40,000 single-family detached units being constructed, building permits for single-family detached. And for easy math, it's about 4 per acre. Okay, so that's about 10,000 acres. 10,000 acres is about 15 square miles of land going under rooftop every single year, which is about 4 miles by 4 miles.
Okay.
Every single year, boom, 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 boom. So if you just look at a map, DFW and these Googles, you can go back in years on the map and you can see how the growth's occurred, That's why one reason we like land, because it's going to get built on. It may not be 5 years, it may be 10 or 15, And it usually keeps up with a real rate of return that's greater than you can get elsewhere.
So
that nominal rate, you're always going to get a good return.
So you'll land bank, you'll get ahead of the game. Would you get ahead of the game 10 years, sit on stuff and wait? Or is most of the stuff you're working on, you're trying to get going on as quickly as you buy it?
Both.
We'll
buy small deals that don't take up a lot of capital.
Yeah.
Like we call it legacy land that we've owned 10, 20 years, or leftover pieces from an MPC.
Yeah.
Not all MPC land is going to be single family. Some could be commercial or retail around the highways or perimeter. That's the last to develop. And so we've built apartment complexes that have been on legacy land. And that's it's all paid for. It's free and clear. And our niche and how we kept out of bankruptcy in the 80s and 90s is that we would keep something free and clear. That was our mantra, go sell what you can and keep something free and clear. Don't have any debt. We learned that net assets can be the clothes you're wearing.
So, how did you almost go bankrupt in the late 80s?
Oh, that's easy.
Too much debt?
Well, young and cocky.
Yeah.
And making a lot of money out of college. And we had that fireworks money and rental house money. And we thought we were, super smart. And my father was very successful, pretty successful. We didn't grow up wealthy. We didn't think, just upper middle class, but
yeah,
he had banks and and so the banking industry in the early 80s was really growing. He sold one of the banks to one of the publics. And then 86 hit, and 86 was a double whammy. Oil fell to $10 a barrel. The federal government passed new rules and regulations on limited partnerships and ability to deduct. So real estate shut down, oil shut down. And that was the two legs of a three-legged stool. And so then banks started getting in trouble. Savings loan were lending long and borrowing short. So, that's where everybody got their mortgages to buy a house was from saving loans, 30-year mortgage. And they would fix it 4%, 6, mainly 6 back then for decades. Average interest rate 6. It's only when the Fed's been subsidizing interest rates the last 10 years. And that's why we're in so much trouble. We're going to be with this debt because no one's paid market rate. That's a different story. But so the bank started getting in trouble, and the federal government really didn't like Texas. Texas was cocky, the state as a whole, of oil and gas and bumper stickers and stuff. So they started auditing the banks. And in those days, this is I don't want to get into it, but long story short, you had to mark to market.
Yeah.
So the assets would start falling in value.
Yeah.
And as they fell in value, the next one would fall in value, and the next one, and the next one. And so the banks didn't have enough capital. And I want to tell you a story. So my father was in banking and was the majority owner of the Bank of Dallas. It's a good mid-sized bank.
Yeah.
Down in Oak Lawn. And and the loans started going bad. And we were riding horses one day, and his best friend was there, and he said, his best friend said, my father's name was Jay. He said, JL, I know the feds are asking for more capital. He said, don't put it in. He said, that's not a good idea. And my father, I was just sitting there, we were just walking, I'm riding horses. And he said, Paul, I got to. He said, we've got friends, we got investors, we got shareholders we got to take care of. He goes, it's not going to work. My father did anyway, and it busted him.
Really?
Mm-hmm. Bad. So he lost all the banks, pledged all the banks. We had, at that time, 10% of the Cowboys. We had real estate. And so that was my job, really, to come down to Dallas and help renegotiate all that debt, figure out how he's 65. That's terrible. And so he kept 2 dealerships and then rebuilt everything.
I can just see in your eyes that was a tough time.
Tough.
Did it come out of nowhere?
No, there was warnings. There was warnings. But what can you do? There's not much he could do. In those days, everything was a personal note, personal guarantee. And so that's our paradigm. So that's what, and we were in our late 20s, and we said, we're never signing personal guarantees. Just not doing it, because no one has control over a macro event. 08 was kind of a macro event. We saw that coming. In 06, 07, we went to Florida and checked out home builders and trying to get them here. And we would go to these MPCs, Chris. And I was standing at, this You Are Here table, everything. And there's like 1,000 lots or 1,500, these big giant master plan communities. And I'm talking to a couple standing there. And I said, well, you guys going to buy a house, and all that? Oh, yeah, yeah. Well, what are you looking at? Well, this is our fifth house. Fifth house? Why are you buying houses? 5 houses. We're investors and we flip them. And you don't live in them? No. And so I asked the salesperson, what percentage of the sales are investors? And they said, oh, almost all of them. I said, this is not going to last.
Yeah.
Right? Because there's no stability in that for that exact reason. So we came back and we had investors in a couple of deals. We said, we're selling all this. Don and I didn't have investors in our MPCs at the time. We sold them all in 06, 07, and then everything fell apart. But the investors wouldn't sell. So we had to deal with those properties and problems. So we learned not to take personal guarantees on debt. That's how we survived 08. That's how we survived many recessions. And it's hard to find lenders. It really is a lot of times.
How long did that period last? I mean, was it at 86? It kind of didn't start getting like, how long were you
it was
in
a
the
long
fire
time.
for?
Yeah,
Was
it was a
years?
until 93, 92, 93. 93, it started turning around. So it was a 5-7 year process.
God.
Long time for Texas, but there was opportunities there. And so we took advantage of them and bought a lot of assets way below replacement cost.
You're in your neck of the woods. It's good. It's humming right now. You talked about the debt. More broadly speaking, Texas is a great place to be. Is there anything that you're very kind of plugged in around Texas? You're just, obviously you've been in this game for a long time. You've been through multiple cycles. Like, is there anything you're seeing that keeps your eyebrow raised? Like, is there a certain data point or signal that you're paying attention to? And this is more probably a macro question than just DFW, which, isn't like Detroit, which isn't like,
right.
LA, but what are you looking for?
Yes, there are. We're concerned. We're always concerned. Like I said, our paradigm was from the 80s. So we've been dark clouds, kind of wake up a dark cloud.
Yeah.
It's optimistic dark cloud, I'd say.
Yeah.
We're very, very fortunate. All of us are in DFW, to be in DFW. DFW is the best market in the United States for real estate and probably for a lot of businesses. And the United States is the best place to be in business. So, you're one place in the world where you really want to live and be entrepreneurial and have opportunities to excel and be wealthy. It's DFW. So we're fortunate in that manner. Dallas, as created 150,000 jobs last 2-3 years. That's more than any other city, even New York. So, and they're 5 times the size or 4 times. So we're very fortunate. But what keeps us up at night is, how do we mitigate risk, macro risk, and still able to take risk locally?
Yep.
And macro events that we're concerned about, of course, interest rates is a big factor. We call them, the market calls them black swan events. I don't call them black swan events.
What do you call them?
I call them like vultures. Because they're circling, waiting to eat the carcass. Black swan is kind of a nice animal. Not nice. And when that black swan or that vulture landed in 08, it was at the epicenter of that crisis was housing, right? It was people buying houses they shouldn't and mortgages they can't afford. So that tier broke down. But it's different now. There's more equity involved in most loans, whether it's apartments, subdivisions, and so there's a lot of equity involved. So it's going to help cushion a blow if there is one. However, there is always a macro event like the war in Ukraine, the COVID, those type of situations where no one can predict, but you have to be prepared in case one hits. Because there's no exit. Land is highly illiquid.
Yeah.
Office bill, NOI deals, retail, whatever. If there's income being produced, and even if your tenants leave, there's liquidity there at some point, and it may be a year or two away, but there will be some liquidity. Land is not that way because there's no income. There's no value to it until you actually create the value, which is why we like land, create value. But that's where the profit center is in development. So what keeps us up? I'm worried about the political environment.
it's an election year. So you talk to a lot of people in the real estate industry,
Yeah.
like, what are you doing? They're like, I don't know. It's an election year. We're going to wait and see what happens with the election. I'll end it. Let's end it on this.
Yes, sir.
Let's end it where we started.
Okay.
So you said the most important word in the dictionary is
profit.
Why?
Well, as I was telling you before we went on air, that I've been active with Junior Achievement, and I really love the organization. It teaches free enterprise, how to capitalism in our public school system, mainly in the lower income areas and in underprivileged areas, because they have no idea. These kids have no idea. They're graduating from high school, and the program starts at grade 1 through 12, and they don't know how to get a job. They don't know how to interview. They don't know how to look someone in the eye. They don't know how to shake hands. And so I tutor and go into the classrooms, and we practice these things. And one of the things that I talk to them about is, why do things exist the way they are? When you look out the window, why are this street here? Why are these houses here? Is this table here, or the clothes here, or your shoes? What causes all that to occur? And they just not involved. And they're just going through life. They're at 17, 18 years old.
Yeah.
And I said, there's one word, most important word in the dictionary. It's profit. I said, everything exists in society for a profit.
Yeah.
And it's the profit that makes things go. Now, profit's everything from labor. I say, when you sell your labor, you sell your time, that's a profit. You have to make a profit, or you're not going to do that.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to get them to think about money, think about what it is that they're selling and they have in life, and what it's going to take to start their own business. And and they figure it out pretty quickly. I said, what happens when a business doesn't have profit? Well, it goes broke, Mr. Huffines. Well, what happens when it goes broke to all the employees? Well, you fire them. Okay. And then where do they get a job? At the next business. What if that business doesn't have a profit? So they get it. And I said, and how does the government exist? Taxes. Well, who pays the taxes? Well, the people and businesses. And what if there's no businesses because they didn't make any profit? Well, there's no taxes. And so what happens to the government? There's no government. So they kind of can put the pieces together and understand. Anyway, so it was fun. It's fun exercise for them to put it all together.
And what's the last exercise you give them on $100? Is it $100 a week or $100
right.
a month?
So I asked them, I said, guys, what's it cost to wake up in the morning, put your feet on the ground? And, I don't know. I said, well, what's your break even? And they said, well, I don't know. So I said, we're going to figure it out. So how much are you going to make? So they tell us $20 an hour, 50 tell me. We go through this variable cost, fixed cost, comes out to about $50 a day to break even, 55. So you're going to have a roommate in your apartment? Or you're going to rent a 1 bedroom. How much are 1 bedrooms? How much are 2 bedrooms? No one quizzes them. How much are car payments? How much is the insurance? How many miles is it to your work? Is it 15 miles? And how many miles to the gallon do you get?
Oh, okay.
And you get 15 miles to the gallon, and you're going to spend $4 to go to work, and you spend $4 to come home, and you're making $10 an hour. That's kind of a loser. So you're going to take the bus, and some of these kids are getting it, and they're entrepreneurial. One guy kept saying, well, I know I can ride the bus. And so they're figuring things out. And one thing I thought was funny, I said, well, everybody's got a cell phone, right? Is that a variable cost or fixed cost? Fixed cost. They all said that is 100%.
You got to take away a lot of things before you take it away.
Right. You got to have a cell phone. And they're probably right now. This has been going on a while, but it's a lot of fun. And then I ask them, who's their partner for life? Because we put so how many hours a year do you work? It's 2,000, 2,100. And if you get overtime, about 10% of the class knows what overtime is. The rest don't. And you get overtime, how much is that? Time and a half. So we put that up on the board. That's their revenue, and divide by 12 and get 4 months. And I said, well, okay, so that's who's your partner for life? Well, I don't have a partner. Yeah, you do. Your partner for life wants 20% of your gross revenue. Forever. And don't cheat this guy. Yeah. This guy's got all the power in the world to come get what you owe him. That's the government, the IRS. And they just never even think about that. Yeah. So now they're down to 80%. And then we go from there, and you say, back to your question. And I said, then the next thing you're going to take out of this budget is this $100. Because if you take $100 every single month for the rest of your life, and you invest in you, so I call it invest in yourself, and you earn 10% on that, put it in an IRA or whatever, over the life of the equity market, you can probably get 10%. That's just a round number. Rule of 72, You're going to get a double in 7.2 years, and you're going to have about 8 doubles the time you're 75. And the sooner you start, you'll retire with $1.6 million in today's nominal dollars, 1.6 million. And all you've saved is $1,200 a year for 60 years. Oh, 50 years.
That sounds pretty good.
It's pretty good. Yeah. Inflation's a problem, but assuming your rate of return is taking that into account.
All right. Last question.
Yes, sir.
Have costs leveled out in your world, or are they still creeping up?
Good question. Costs have leveled out.
That's good.
Mm-hmm.
Have they creeped down at all?
We've seen some bids coming in for paved water and sewer coming down from what we estimated, not using our contingencies. Pavement's still kind of high going up.
Yeah.
And some of the concrete pipe. But yeah, no, costs are coming down in the development. Now, not steel, vertical's not.
Yeah.
But horizontal.
All right, Phillip. Thanks for joining me today.
Chris, it was a pleasure. I'm sorry I talked too much.
That was amazing.